Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Trans Stupid, where I take a look at the wonderful world of LGBTQIA+ news because, well, stupidity is intersectional. So a couple of months ago, I made a video on how beards are not feminine. It's a point that I really strongly stand by. I can't think of anything that's more of a masculine trait than a big bushy beard. But apparently nobody has told the Department of Work and Pensions. I know, right? I mean, I did a video that got over 2,500 views. How were they not aware that I've talked on this issue? And maybe it would have saved them a little bit of bother. Doctor sacked for refusing to refer to transgender woman as she. A Christian doctor was sacked after saying he could not refer to any 6-foot-tall bearded man as madam, an employment tribunal has heard. Dr. David McCarriff told a panel that using transgender pronouns was a ritual denial of obvious truth. The 56-year-old from Dudley claims the Department for Work and Pensions, DWP, discriminated against his religion by suspending him after he said he would not use gender pronouns for what he called someone's chosen sex. Recalling an incident that allegedly led to his dismissal, the devout Reformed Baptist told the tribunal that an argument arose with his manager not over rights and sensitivities, but instead my refusal to make an abstract ideological pledge to call any 6-feet-tall bearded man madam on his whim. He added, "Throughout this process, I kept stressing that my objection to that misuse of pronouns was based on my Christian beliefs and conscience." Dr. McCarriff claims that weeks after applying for the post in May 2018, and while on a 2-week training course, he was called aside by James Owen, the recruitment manager who had interviewed him weeks earlier, and questioned. McCarriff said, "I was engaged in working on my second real case when Mr. Owen called me out of my work. The purpose was to interrogate me about my beliefs in relation to the use of pronouns." That discussion culminated in Mr. Owen asking me the following question. Let's just summarise this. If you have a man 6 feet tall with a beard who says he wants to be addressed as she and Mrs., would you do that? Dr. McCarriff claims that after telling him he could not, in conscience, do this because of his religion, Mr. Owen said that failing to use transgender pronouns meant he was at overwhelming risk of losing his job. The DWP denies Dr. McCarriff's beliefs are protected under the Equality Act, while the recruitment agency which appointed him to his post has argued that his views conflict with the fundamental rights of others. Robert Moretto, representing the DWP, asked Dr. McCarriff about the General Medical Council Code of Conduct, which states you must be polite and considerate to those being assessed and not express personal beliefs to patients which may cause distress. Dr. McCarriff said of the regulations, "It doesn't stop me from saying, I am sorry, I'm Christian. There are other things I can't do. I can't be forced to do something that goes against my conscience. What I am saying about pronouns is not going to affect the quality of the assessment that I do. I don't object to doing assessments on transgender people." Dr. McCarriff regularly brings up his religious belief as a reason why he will not refer to a 6-foot-tall bearded man as she or madam. But I don't think this is really a religious argument one way or the other. The examples which are being given to Dr. McCarriff for him to say whether he would or would not gender that person in the way they would like is something which a few years ago would be seen as a parody. I always found the notion of trans women being these 6-foot-tall, burly, big bearded people to be this strange, bizarre world that I've never been used to. But the trans lobby now runs with this. And it is completely unreasonable to expect someone to refer to a man of that build as a woman. And I'm using man here, not because of misgendering, but if you don't care about your appearance so much that you are apparently a trans woman and you have a beard, I'm sorry, but I do not respect that, and I'm not going to call you a woman. This is something I feel very strongly about as someone who has gone through a lot to get where I am through my transition. This is complete laziness, and it's expecting everybody else in the world to do the legwork. I'm an individualist, and I understand that it's my responsibility to be seen as feminine as possible if I want the world to treat me as a woman. I think I've been mostly successful in this as I've had very little problems since transitioning, but I put all this down to what my mindset has been. On the other hand, you have these bizarre people who believe everybody else should change. I'm not the one with the problem, it's the world. This shouldn't even be a conversation at all. If you're not even trying to appear feminine, why should anyone respect you? It's not the end of the world to not gender that person as a woman. You've got to do a little bit of work if you want them sweet pronouns. And it's terrifying to me that this is what the narrative of the community has become. We wanted to move away from the stereotype of trans women being in bad dresses and poorly kempt. And yet this is now the rhetoric which is being embraced by everyone who's chasing this magical community. I cannot blame this doctor for not wanting to gender a man with a beard as a woman. And it's not his religion that's stopping him from doing that, it's common sense. I would do the same in his position. I'm sure every single person watching this video would do the same. And before you say there is no trans women with these kinds of beards, take a look at someone like Alex Drummond. Or how about this apparent woman? Or this one? This is laziness. This is embarrassing. And I fully condemn the people pushing this narrative because I think it is dangerous to transsexuals. It pushes a bizarre idea of what we are. But moving away from the wonderful world of pronouns to a Hollywood actress who, for some reason, has upset the trans again. After trans protests, Scarlett Johansson still says she should play everyone. Lost in Translation actor was criticised for taking a trans role last year, though she eventually pulled out of the project. Scarlett Johansson is fueling the never-ending controversy about acting and appropriation. The actor, known for playing Black Widow in the MCU movies, has made several faux pas in the past. Last but not least, she took on the role of a trans masculine character in Rub and Tug in 2018. After defending her choice, she then decided to leave the project due to huge negative backlash. In a new interview with As If magazine, however, Johansson maintained she can play any characters regardless of gender and race. You know, as an actor, I should be allowed to play any person, or any tree, or any animal because that is my job, and the requirements of my job. Yes, that is completely accurate to the role of an actress. I feel it's like a trend in my business and it needs to happen for various social reasons, yet there are times it does get uncomfortable when it affects the art because I feel art should be free of restrictions. She then added, I think society will be more connected if we just allowed others to have their own feelings and not expect everyone to feel the way we do. Of course, this gained a lot of backlash because this is someone who is cis, het and white, although female, daring to talk about the role of being an actress. And it's quite interesting, this is an actress saying anyone should be able to play any role, when we've recently had the announcement from Disney that the next lead in the remake of The Little Mermaid is going to be black, which is completely different from what Ariel was in the original. It's almost like the same people who are championing that move are also now condemning ScarJo for saying basically the same thing. And I don't get why the whole framing of what Scarlett Johansson said has to be brought back to the tranners. This is just people who got upset that they weren't given a role. Maybe there should be more decent trans actors out there. I mean, we have Talisa Garcia, but who else really is there? I mean, these kinds of positions take a lot of training, a lot of time and a lot of effort. And I don't think it's just because they're being ignored. Movie studios are showing that they're very willing to listen to the progressive mob. This would be a perfect time for a trans actor or actress or whatever to jump into the spotlight and take advantage of this cultural shift. Yet there's not many of them that are doing it. And one of the only ones who was accused of the crime of being cis when she took a role in the first place, despite the fact that, she's trans as well. Scarlett Johansson eventually tried to clarify a little bit more about what she said, but by then the damage had been done. It had been trending on Twitter for quite a while, lots of people getting very angry. But again, this is another example of someone not even mentioning the term trans, and yet the community just jumps on it. And all of a sudden it's now a trans issue. And now I'm covering it as a trans issue. Now, the next story I want to comment on, I'm not going to go into too much detail on because this is a subject which I keep on saying I am going to do a proper in-depth video on. I just have been busy doing other things. But I just want to highlight something. The book that dares to take on the transgender myths told to children. Experts reveal psychologists are scared to question transgender ideology. GPs are afraid of being branded transphobic, and teens are being wrongly diagnosed. The rocketing number of children seeking to change sex has become a national scandal, a powerful coalition of whistleblowers, academics and medical experts warns today. In a dramatic intervention marking a watershed in a transgender debate, they have come together to express fears about the dire consequences faced by thousands of youngsters changing gender, including infertility and long-term health problems. A whistleblower from Britain's only NHS gender clinic for children said, "I'm really angry at what's happening to these children. What I've witnessed feels incredibly distressing and disturbing and like something that should be stopped." The experts' concerns are laid bare in a forthcoming book of essays entitled Inventing Transgender Children and Young People. It challenges what it calls the dangerous transgender ideology promoted in schools, universities, the NHS and other public institutions. The subject of trans children is probably the most controversial part of the trans debate as a whole, because you have two sides that feel very, very strongly and they almost always rest on one kind of extreme. On the one hand, you have the trans activists who believe that all children's genders are valid, and therefore whatever means that this child can take to transition should be respected no matter what. On the flip side, you'll have people who think that a child cannot have gender dysphoria and therefore any kind of treatment against them is completely immoral and is tantamount to child abuse. Now, as someone who is a transsexual, as I've mentioned in the past, I can attest to the difficulty of growing up with gender dysphoria. However, my concern with the modern movement is just how exhilarated it is towards actually transitioning and accepting everything being told as gospel if it comes from the mouth of a child and it's about gender. Quite frankly, children don't really need to be taught a lot about gender expression, gender identity. I think if it comes to something like transsexuality, it should only ever be addressed if it's something which is really relevant to the kind of situation that that child or children or whatever are actually in. They don't need to know about it otherwise, because realistically, if it wasn't for this trend that we're seeing at the moment, a lot of people probably wouldn't come across a trans person at all in their life, and especially a young child wouldn't. But the move to transition a lot of these people does worry me. And I'm someone who, I know that a lot of the too cutes will hate this, but yes, I am a gatekeeper when it comes to medical intervention in transitioning. I think it's vital that this is correct when a child or anyone at any age transitions, but especially a child at a young age when they are very impressionable. I do think this really needs to be more of a conversation. That being said, I don't believe that a lot of young people are being forcibly given hormones or anything along those lines, but I can certainly see why there are a lot of concerns that people are having. I will read this book when it comes out and I'll do comments on it then, but when it comes to trans kids, I do want to make sure that I'm having a correct, what I would consider to be a correct opinion on this. This isn't a case of me saying all trans people are valid no matter what age, or transitioning is abuse. I think the actual argument for young people with gender dysphoria is a lot more nuanced than either of those points. But just please give me some time to actually work on my argument, because I don't want it to be misconstrued by anyone. Now, the last story that I want to touch on today is something which I don't know how much to read into it, but I thought this was quite an interesting point that I wanted to highlight. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are aware of an Antifa activist who was shot dead trying to attack an ICE detention center in Tacoma, Washington a couple of days ago. Now, this really is a terrorist attack by Antifa. They've moved on quite quickly from milkshakes, haven't they? Apparently, beating up gay Asian journalists wasn't enough. So now they're really going into trying and bombing places. As you would expect, this man's actions were celebrated by those on the hard left. But like many insane lunatics with guns out there, the attempted bomber actually wrote a manifesto. And it talks about how we're living in fascist times and how the fascists have taken over because, of course, that's what the far left believe. Everything is an attack to them. Everyone is a fascist. We know this. We've gone through it. It's not that interesting to go into that because we all know how they think. But there's quite a specific extract that I want to read out. My trans comrades have transformed me, solidifying my conviction that we will be guided to a dreamed of future by those most marginalised among us today. I have dreamed it so clearly that I have no regret for not seeing how it turns out. Thank you for bringing me so far along. It's quite strange that trans people were the only marginalised group that was mentioned in this manifesto. I've regularly talked about the links between the likes of Antifa and trans activist groups. It's something which is growing, and indeed a trans activist group in the UK, Sister Not Sister UK, actually celebrated the attack, because of course they did. And just as a quick test, I wanted to see whether the promotion of violence would go against Facebook's terms of service, and unsurprisingly it doesn't, because which we all would know anyway. I mean, last week they did accidentally tell everyone that encouraging violence is fine so long as it's against an approved target after all. But I just wanted to highlight this link because the rabid left and the trans activist movement do appear to be growing in tandem with each other. And it's almost like one is just encouraging the other at this point. I'm not saying that trans activists encouraged this particular attack, although some certainly have praised it afterwards. But I think it's fair to kind of point this out when they're the only group really being mentioned here. So what are your thoughts on the topics I've discussed about this week? Is there anything in particular I've missed off? There's always a lot of crazy that goes on, but please let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoy what I do, please feel free to follow me on Twitter. You can also support me on Patreon and Subscribestar. I do have one quick announcement before I go though. With special thanks to Discordia, Jury Rigging and Scrump, my Discord server should be up in the next couple of days and I'll let everyone know when that's up. But until then, thank you all so much for watching and I'll see you all next time. And a special thank you to Sarah, James, Evil Moif and the rest of my supporters on Patreon and Subscribestar.